Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Over the course of the next 60 minutes, we've got power-packed lineup of experts, expert analysis and stories that matter to Indians. But first up, the headlines. Dhaka targets ISKCON amidst minority crackdown. Bangladesh government dubs ISKCON organization as being fundamentalists. India hits back, says that there's bipartisan opposition against Hindu priest's arrest. 60-day Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire halts the 14-month-long war. IDF opens fire as Lebanese return to their southern villages. Pakistan opposition calls off protest for the time being. PTI says that it's suspending the protest due to government brutality on its supporters. Union government approves India's own space station. India's very own space station is now set to be ready by 2035. And US President-elect Donald Trump appoints Jay Bhattacharya as the head of NIH. Donald Trump says that Bhattacharya will restore the NIH to the gold standards of the past. All right, the big story that we are tracking right now is the latest that's coming in from Bangladesh, where a Bangladeshi court has denied bail to the Hindu leader Chinmoy Krishna Brahmachari, who's been arrested on sedition charges. And in fact, he's been sent to prison in triggering protests by community members in various locations, including the capital Dhaka and the port city of Chattogram. A protest broke out demanding Das's release in different districts, including Dhaka, Chattogram, Khulna and Dinajpur, as per some of the local reports coming in. The BJP has staged a protest in Kolkata against the arrest of Chinmoy Krishna Brahmachari, who was arrested day before on, as I said, sedition charges. The case was registered in October after Das was accused of disrespecting Bangladesh's national flag during a rally in Chattogram. The arrest and denial of bail also saw a response from the External Affairs Ministry here in India. All right, let's get in my colleague Saurabh to fill us in with the very latest that's coming in on a story that's actually set to have a huge impact, Saurabh, on the latest in terms of the India-Bangladesh relationship as well. Talk to us about what your sources are telling you. You've been working the phones. What is it that you're picking up that's happening across the border in Bangladesh?
Well, one of the things that is extremely difficult is also because very little is actually coming out, but there are videos in the public domain that show that there have been continuing attacks on the minority community, predominantly the Hindu community in Bangladesh. And the arrest of Chinmoy Krishna Brahmachari, who was organizing and uniting minorities, has led to protests from the minority community. Yesterday there was a crackdown when Chinmoy Krishna was being led out of the courthouse and being taken to prison. And there was a death also reported. And the chief advisor to the interim government in Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus, says that Bangladesh is committed to upholding religious harmony. But that is something that's not being reflected on the ground, where radical forces are threatening minorities, and minorities are facing targeted attacks. So it is a situation that impacts West Bengal. Neighboring West Bengal and Bangladesh have a lot of trade, and today the BJP has held a protest in Kolkata, marched to the Bangladesh High Commission in Kolkata with a set of demands, largely being that the release of Chinmoy Mahaprabhu, who was only peacefully uniting minorities and organizing people against these attacks that have been taking place on the Hindu community in Bangladesh. And the issue of labeling ISKCON as a fundamentalist organization is something that has caused a lot of outrage, because just a few months ago, when there were floods in Bangladesh, the organization of ISKCON was a leading sort of relief provider doing relief work in the flood-affected districts. And what Shubhendu Adhikari,
Exactly.
the leader of opposition in West Bengal, said was that at that time no one called the ISKCON a fundamentalist body because they were working for everyone, all Bangladeshis, irrespective
Right.
of community. So that has led to a lot of outrage as well.
In fact, Saurabh, that's exactly what I was coming to, which is that the fact is this must have really caused a lot of shock and dismay to the community in Bangladesh. The fact that ISKCON has been labelled as a fundamentalist and the fact that the charges are as serious as sedition.
Yes, and human rights watchers and human rights groups in Bangladesh have pointed out that the charges seem to be a trumped-up, sedition charge, which clearly lack evidence at this point. However, what is equally shocking is that bail has been denied, and this is something. There was that one picture that emerged from that courtroom where, in a sea of black coats, there was one man, clad in saffron robes, and that has kind of also led to a lot of sympathy, a lot of support for Chinmoy Mahaprabhu and ISKCON as a whole. Because, like I said, and as I was mentioning a short while ago, when floods took place, ISKCON carried out relief work, and that has led to a lot of angst, a lot of outrage, because ISKCON is a very respected body. I mean, they've been doing relief work in West Bengal, in Bangladesh, and across the world for years. And in the recent times, with the number of attacks on the minority community, predominantly, like I said, the Hindu community growing, they had also taken on the role of organizing a movement demanding safety and security of minorities. And that is when these calls of acting against ISKCON or calling them fundamentalists, labeling them fundamentalists, came about in Bangladesh.
Indeed. Thanks much for giving us all those details, Saurabh, and a story that I'm afraid I'm going to keep coming back to, given how volatile it is. Shifting focus now to the latest coming in as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, where there is a bit of a balancing act that the new president is really trying to do. You have Sri Lanka's new president, who is now in his cabinet, has said and is yet to in fact discuss removing a temporary one-year ban on Chinese vessels coming into Sri Lankan waters. The ban was imposed by former leader Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was the Sanake's predecessor. His government in December last year had put that ban. Our Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that the ban was for 2024 and will end on 21st of December this year. The decision to ban research ships was taken following very strong security concerns that were raised by India, citing possible spying by Chinese vessels in the Indian Ocean. Now, after coming to power, the Sanayake allowed a Chinese Navy ship to dock in Colombo last month. All right, now what does this mean in terms of security implications? What does it mean for the Indian Ocean as a region, and what does it mean for India-Sri Lanka relationship? Let's get in Rohan Samarajiva joining me from Sri Lanka to talk more about what this means. He is a policy analyst and chairman of a think tank. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time and speaking to me on India Global. Let me start by asking you this, that why is it that the new president is delaying a decision that many seem to now be in agreement with? What is the reason for his delay?
Well, I believe the 12 months should have been used to get a robust long-term policy on several issues. So, for example, what are the rules with regard to ships of various kinds coming into refuel in our ports? That is one question. What are the rules affecting military vessels coming in? That's another question. And there is this category that we are discussing right now, which is what about scientific research vessels? Now, of course, there will be those who will say these are not scientific research vessels, these are spying vessels. But we have to also understand that Sri Lanka has got a massive exclusive economic zone. It's 517,000 square kilometers. And we have to allow certain kinds of research to be conducted. Now, should they be conducted by Chinese research vessels? Should they be conducted by Canadian research vessels? Should they be conducted by Indian research vessels? Those are the kinds of things that the policy should have addressed. And when the policy is addressing that, the question that came up last year, what is the presence and what are the safeguards that we have in terms of Sri Lankan scientists on board? So these kinds of nuanced aspects should have been worked out in the 12 months that we had. But as everybody knows, we've had elections and various kinds of turmoil. So I'm afraid we don't have a robust, long-term, well thought out, well consulted policy. And if I was in the government shoes, I would say we'll extend it for 6 more months. And during that time, we'll get this in place. But I can't speak for them.
Let's get in a voice from the other side. In fact, let's get in Mr. Radhakrishnan as well on the broadcast. How do you see this move, or rather a lack of a move by Mr. Dissanayake, raising suspicions in several policy corridors in New Delhi?
See, it's very clear that Sri Lanka today, as in with the JVP, NPP in power, sees China as a friend and India as a reality. They are very, very aware and cognizant of both these facts. They definitely want India on their side. They treat India as a country which they cannot wish away. It's right in their face, and it is the biggest power in South Asia, so to speak. So regardless of what influence China has on Sri Lanka, it understands that reality. At the same time, we have to realize that JVP is exceedingly comfortable with China, has had extensive relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Its leaders have been up and down to China. And to the extent that you would have noticed news reports of the Chinese ambassador going to the northern province and unveiling a huge bonanza of 1.5 billion rupees of welfare measures and whatnot, which is what usually the Indians do to the Tamils. So that is the extent of the relationship and the depth of the relationship, and to the extent that the Chinese ambassador feels it is okay to go to the northern province, which is largely inhabited by the Tamils, who have traditionally been India's friends, so to
speak. So
it is
China entering into traditional comfort zones of India, and in the backdrop of some of these policy indications coming in from the present Sri Lankan government, how do you see the next couple of years panning out for this new government? Radhakrishnan, let me ask you this, and then I get a counter from Rohan as well. Yeah.
See, it's very clear that Sri Lanka is right now walking the tightrope. And Anura, during his trip, which he will make to Delhi shortly, again, he's playing all the cards right. Unlike the Nepal Prime Minister Sharma Oli, he's making India the first port of call. So he has got that right. Beyond that, we'll have to definitely wait and see. Let's remember that we are discussing this on Mahavira Ranal, the Heroes' Day, which is observed in the north. JVP did not have to take a serious stand on it because of the cyclone that is, which is last Jaffna and of course southern Tamil Nadu. Because of that, otherwise there would have been a serious issue, and JVP would have been going back on its word of allowing the Tamils to observe Mahavira Ranal. In fact,
yes,
the public security minister had made it very clear that you cannot observe the death of LTTE fighters, but you can observe or have commemoration of family members killed in the conflict.
Yes.
This is extremely, ridiculous to say that, because family members died either on the side of LTTE or from fire from the Sri Lankan forces. If we can't celebrate either, then it becomes an issue. But thankfully for the JVP, it was saved the embarrassment, or it was not forced to take a stand today because of
yes,
the kind of weather that has prevailed there. So luck has helped the JVP as of now. But we don't see any movement in the political solution. And I don't think Delhi is particularly interested in pushing that narrative either of a political solution. So I think there is both sides are standing down, and there could be a via media when Anura meets the Indian leadership in Delhi later in December.
Absolutely, all eyes on that very important visit. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out the time speaking to me on India Global. Shifting focus now to another neighbor of India, that is Pakistan, where following government crackdown, PTI, that is Imran Khan's party, Its supporters have now called off Islamabad protests for, well, the time being. Imran Khan's party had to stop the protests after 6 people were killed in the unrest. The party released a statement on social media platform X calling it off for the moment. The protests ended following a day of clashes between security forces and protesters in the city's red zone, ended in the party leadership's hasty retreat. In the early hours of Wednesday, a press release shared by the party on its official account said that in view of the government's brutality and the government's plan to turn the capital into a quote-unquote slaughterhouse for unarmed citizens, we suspend and announce the suspension of the peaceful protest for the time being. All right, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with lots more stories, lots more analysis. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is India Global. Let's now take a look at the other big story that impacted, well, India, the global south and the world, which is pretty much the failure of COP29. And I have with me an important voice to really try and understand what goes on from here. How can India now pick up the pieces of what many would call a very fractured climate talks, and how then India can move forward on that and play a larger role in terms of taking the global south with it. Joining me is Dr. Masama Thioe, who's the project executive of UNFCCC, joining me, and he's in fact at the Global Innovation Hub. Thank you so much, Dr. Masama, for speaking to NDTV. Let me start by asking you, that a lot of those talks didn't fructify into anything concrete. But speaking from India's point of view, how do you think New Delhi can now align its development priorities with the kind of climate goals that have been set?
Thank you for inviting me. For us, we do not see the challenge of sustainable development and the challenge of climate being two things separated. They have to be considered integrated. This is why we always put focus on the starting point, the satisfaction of the needs of the many people, no one being left behind, while keeping human activities within planetary boundaries. So it means for us that addressing climate change is not about pure decarbonization of the economy, but it's more about how can we develop and satisfy the needs of the many people while keeping human activities within planetary boundaries. Of course, it's challenging because we need to address both simultaneously. It requires reinventing our economy, reinventing our industry, reinventing our society, but also reinventing ourselves. This is very important. It means that innovation will have to play a key role, not only technology innovation, but also policy innovation, innovative financial instrument, innovative business model, innovative product from the culture and creative industry to facilitate adoption, but also innovative cooperative approach because radical collaboration will be required among nations and within nations.
In terms of the opportunities that it throws up for India, because India is also not just talking about itself, it's talking about some of the other and most of the developing world and the global south.
I think the lessons that will be learned from integrating climate and sustainability solution is an asset and something that India will be able to export. India will be able to position itself as a solution provider. You know, addressing climate and sustainability simultaneously requires the development of a new systemic innovation framework that is human-centric, that is transformative, and that is vision-driven. So it means that we need to be able to paint the future that we would like to achieve and backcast from that future and translate this future into needs in terms of climate and sustainability innovation. What are the existing technologies that we need to deploy at scale by combining them with innovative policies and innovative financial instruments and innovative business model? And what are the missing technologies that we need to develop to be able to satisfy the needs of the many people while staying within the planetary boundary? So this knowledge is an asset. And those countries that will be able to acquire this knowledge and this competence will position themselves as the solution provider of the future. But I mentioned also that it requires reinventing ourselves. It requires that we come up with a new metacognitive reframing framework that challenge the way we are thinking, that challenge the way we are acting, that challenge the way we are interacting, and promote three very important core values: caring, sharing, and daring.
How do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So the first thing, in my view, that is very important is the understanding of the needs of the future. What are the climate and sustainability innovation of the future that are needed to make the climate and sustainability solution? What are the skills that are needed to transition toward sustainability? And then with these two understanding, India can be have the that the tool that will enable the country to support the development of other developing countries by providing capacity building, but also by providing some of the technology that are needed by these countries to leapfrog. One thing that is really important is that the global south will need to leapfrog. We cannot afford to have the same development paceway as the global north. This will not be sustainable. So it means that digital technology will need to be fully leveraged to facilitate the leapfrogging of the developing countries. If India managed to leverage digital technology and leapfrog, this experience can be shared with other developing countries.
I'm hopeful that some of those technology transfers will happen soon from global north. But what is the kind of partnerships that India can really build in terms of public-private collaborations to expedite the climate transition and also come out as a leader for the global south to emulate?
Actually, we will need broad partnership, public, private, but also philanthropy. Philanthropy have a very important role to play. They will bring the seed funding and the catalyst funding that is very flexible and easy to adapt. The policymakers, the public sector will bring the right policies, particularly the investment policies and the climate policies, and can also create a space that is very attractive for investing in climate and sustainability solutions, including by promoting public green procurement. And the private sector will bring two things. It will bring investment in green activities, but also investment in innovation, climate and sustainability innovation.
All right, Dr. Masamba, thanks much for taking out the time. I disagree with some of your thoughts that the burden lies on the global south, but what we can agree on the fact is that there's no time like now, given how urgent the situation is. Appreciate you taking out the time. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side and talk more about some of the other stories, including Russia, Ukraine, and several others. Stay with us. Hello and welcome. This is India Global. We're talking about now the biggest story coming in from the Russia-Ukraine war, where there seems to be, in fact, all efforts being made at this stage to look like that there could be a further escalation in the conflict. The reason for that, twofold. One is the fact that the Russian war machine keeps on gaining territory in eastern Ukraine, but at the same time, there is now movement back home in Moscow as well. Russia has summoned the UK ambassador, Nigel Casey, in Moscow on Tuesday after ordering a British diplomat to leave the country on allegations of spying. Those are very serious charges. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson said the ministry had summoned the British ambassador to hand over the notice revoking the diplomat's accreditation. As the war rages on, Russian forces have captured another village in Ukraine's northeastern Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has alleged that 2 civilians have died in the Russian shelling in the city of Sumy in northeastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian media reports indicate that its forces are now advancing in Ukraine at the fastest rate since the early days of the full-scale conflict in 2022, taking an area half the size of London in the last 1 month. On the diplomatic front, well, the G7 foreign ministers have expressed their support for Ukraine and condemned Russia's irresponsible and threatening nuclear rhetoric. In a draft statement, it was issued after a 2-day meeting which concluded recently in Rome, and also warned North Korean support for Russia marks a dangerous expansion of the conflict. Listen in. All right, now amidst the ongoing war, there's yet another unprecedented escalation that has taken place. In fact, there are now reports coming in that the Kremlin has reacted to reported discussions in the West about arming Ukraine with nuclear weapons. Now, if this is a truth, if there's any truth to this, then that's a very serious escalation that could actually happen in a war that all sides are now trying to end or at least try and reach a ceasefire. But what's happening is that there are reports indicating that the US may provide nuclear weapons to Ukraine, something that Russia has come out very strongly against. And it has said that the reported discussions are extremely irresponsible. The New York Times had reported last week that some unidentified Western officials had suggested that President Joe Biden could give Ukraine nuclear weapons before he demits office. Will that be Biden's legacy is the key question. His legacy could be the ceasefire that he's managed to negotiate between Israel and Lebanon. But a possible nuclear weapon to Ukraine, is that a legacy that President Biden wants for his one term? Let's get in those questions on your screens right now before we get in our two experts. So that will Biden violate the non-proliferation treaty? That's question number one. Will NATO support US if at all there is any provision of giving the nuclear weapons to Kyiv? That's the second big question we are asking. And thirdly, will Ukraine be able to survive a Russian nuclear response? Of course, there will be a response. Remember, there's already been a change in the Russian nuclear doctrine. And let's get in Ruslan Botnik to get that answer from. He's the director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics, joining me live from Kyiv. We also have General Sanjay joining me to talk about this. But let me first get in a perspective from Ukraine on a story that I think could actually change the game of warfare going forward. Mr. Botnik, it's not going to be just a unilateral response from Ukraine. There will be an onslaught that will come in from Russia as well. Do you think this would be prudent and wise at this stage to even explore an option like nuclear weapons? Okay, let's get in that question to General Sanjay Soy first. Yes, sir.
In fact, thank you so much, Gaurie. In fact, I would say that what you have rightly brought out, that this is the unprecedented escalation. It was actually jaw-dropping for me, this kind of twist which had come in. Because if you see in last about 1 month or so, the war has gone to the next level, whether it is because of the permission given to the Ukraine of use of ATACMS, attack MS missiles or Storm Shadow missile system, which then Ukraine used it and used it effectively. In fact, yesterday Russia accepted that their air defense system was damaged and their airfield was also damaged. Under these circumstances, when the tension is very high, already very high, when these kinds of statements come of arming Ukraine with nuclear weapons, we can just keep our fingers crossed that the nuclear war should not start, the Third World War should not start. That is the kind of tension which is building up, which is already very tense. The Russia could be very desperate under these circumstances. Though, Gaurie, I would like to highlight that US has some nuclear bases in...
Russia has changed its nuclear doctrine already. In the possibility of any such attack, we're looking at a very strong Russian assault, changing the game completely, changing the warfare completely.
Absolutely, because probably it shows the desperation on the part of Russia, the kind of escalation which is taking place, the kind of every red lines being crossed every now and then. So that's why probably that kind of desperation are there. They change the nuclear policy. The oceanic missile which was launched, which sent a shock wave across the Europe. I mean, people were shocked that if this missile is used against Europe, because as per the change policy, Russia is free to use it. The people who are supporting Ukraine, who are supplying Ukraine with the weapon system, with the arms which are capable of attacking Russia, then it sent a shockwave across the whole Europe. So under these circumstances, though I was saying that Gauriji, US has some nuclear bases already in Europe, like Belgium, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Turkey. But at this point of time, when the tension is so high, when making such statement and trying to arm Ukraine with nuclear weapon is absolutely, I would say, irresponsible. And here I would stand with
But then but then this begs the question that if at all there is any truth to any of that report coming in, will NATO follow suit, or will there be better sense prevailing?
Yeah, I fully agree with you that NATO, I think the biggest losers would be the NATO countries because they are in the proximity of Russia and they are going to be big losers. Second thing is that probably 20th January, only just about few days left before the Biden leaves the office. Before that, is it trying to aid Ukraine or there's something more to it? Trying to create a situation which makes
To
it very,
Mr.
very
Botnick,
difficult for the
that
next administration.
do you think getting nuclear weapons will actually be in the best interest of Ukraine right now?
I don't think so, and I think it's not quite possible for nowadays. But you have to understand that this question of nuclear weapon for Ukraine, it's a political technology question. It's a question of how to make the nowadays Ukrainian-American cooperation unbreakable after the Trump appearance in the presidential post. And this is a question of the possible future security guarantees for Ukraine, because no one country in the world is ready to fight shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine against Russia. And the security weapon renovation, it could be a nuclear weapon renovation could be a security question, very important for Ukraine. But I think it's like a blackmailing, political blackmailing. I don't think this way and this information could be true in the nearest future and could be realized, because it's very expensive and it's very dangerous, because all Ukraine is covered by the Russian rockets.
Also the effort after a war has gone on for over 1,000 days, the effort has to be to try and find a ceasefire, to try and find some possible solution to end the human misery on both sides. Do you think any such provision provides for that, or do you think the focus should be on peace talks to try and get the two parties on the table? Mr. Botnick.
You are asking a very good question, a very sharp question. But let's be honest, both sides now, Ukraine and Russia, declining any ceasefire, decline any freezing of the conflict. They are saying it's not our interest. So it's a question for Ukraine and for Russia also. I think this nuclear weapon discussion is a part of blackmailing. Maybe it's a last bet before the preparation in possible negotiation of or the finding the resolution of this conflict.
General Sanjay, respond to what Mr. Botnick is saying, that this is just negotiating tactics.
Yeah, this could be a messaging also. I mean, you're right. But the fact is, I would say that nuclear weapons are the weapon of deterrence. The whole world use it for as a weapon of deterrence. But at this point of time, when the tension is already so high, when both sides are using the latest weaponry in last about 10, 15 days, the things have gone to the next level. At this point of time, these kinds of statements which are coming in is probably trying to make the situation from bad to worse, especially when the Trump has made it very clearly who is going to be the next president, that he is going to bring peace, he is going to bring the ceasefire. At this point of time, probably is it giving aid to Ukraine, or is it something more to it? Before the Trump come, make it so difficult, make the thing totally impossible
Yes.
for peace to come in. So that could be another reason.
Only time will tell whether the effort is to de-escalate or escalate. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for speaking to me on India Global. And in fact, let's now turn our focus to a very important and a very interesting development that's actually taking place in the UK. Keir Starmer, a man who won the elections, the summer elections in the UK this year with a historic mandate, is now, well, also facing a very important historical statistic, which is that he may just be one of the most unpopular prime ministers in living memory. A petition calling for a fresh general election in the UK has now reached over 2.7 million signatures as the Labour government faces widespread disapproval regarding its policies and post-poll work. This petition urging the government to hold a new general election was set up last week and has been promoted by Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and tech billionaire Elon Musk. According to guidelines, any petition that asks for a change to the law or to policies gets a response from the government after 10,000 signatures. After 100,000 signatures, petitions are considered for debate in Parliament. Meanwhile, now there are 2 in 5 Britons think that they are worse off after Labour Party came to power. As I said, the Keir Starmer government has a very large majority, a brute majority some would say, in Parliament, and they won a historic mandate. But the government has now been criticised over its inheritance tax raid on farmers and the decision to increase the university tuition fees. So what happens in the backdrop of this is going to be extremely interesting, and most importantly, it could even set a precedent for how people's opinion must matter going to matter. Let's get in Ollie Barrett joining me from London to give a perspective on how things are unfolding, or well, some would say, Ollie, they are unraveling sooner than what many would have imagined, sooner than what even Keir Starmer would have imagined.
Keir Starmer would certainly dispute the idea that things are unravelling, but I think he would privately admit that it's been a difficult start to his time in government, with a number of challenges coming his way. Now, some of his critics would say that some of those challenges have been self-inflicted, but there have also been difficult circumstances on the global stage for him to deal with. He saw rioting and unrest over the British summer as well, which gave the new government an immediate challenge when it came to power, but particularly the economic circumstances surrounding the UK at the moment make life very difficult indeed for the new Labour government. They say that that is the legacy that was left them by the Conservative previous government. The Conservatives dispute that and say that actually a lot of the difficulties the current government is now facing is because of the decisions that they have taken around tax, around inheritance, around farming, around various other issues as well. And so Keir Starmer came into power as one of the least popular new prime ministers in modern British history, despite the fact that he won that large mandate, that large majority from the British people. But certainly the polling suggests that since the election took place, he's become less popular still. Right. And that petition, although it doesn't mean anything, it won't have any impact.
I was going to come to that.
Petition does just demonstrate that there are enough.
I was going to come to that, what does this petition really translate into?
Nothing. Nothing at all. The Prime Minister himself has made the point, and he's quite right, that this doesn't really have any meaning. It's not how the system works. The petition means a consideration of a debate of the issue, but Keir Starmer is not going to call a new general election, and he's certainly not going to be doing so off the back of a petition signed by, even if it is a large amount of people. Of course, in the general election itself, far more people than have currently signed this petition actually voted against him, but that's just how the parliamentary system works in this country. He was able, despite the fact that many British people didn't vote for him, he was still able to bring back a large parliamentary majority, which does now mean that from a policy standpoint, he has the ability to bring in many of the policies that he was promising during the election campaign, whether he is an unpopular Prime Minister already or not.
All right, Ollie Barrett joining us to decode a very interesting development. Thanks much, Ollie, for breaking that down for us. And on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with more stories, more perspective, and more interviews. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is India Global. We now turn our attention to the other big conflict that's taking place around the world, the Israel-Gaza and the Israel-Hezbollah conflict, where there is now a ceasefire in place that is expected to now last for 60 days. Israel has approved a U.S. brokered ceasefire agreement with Lebanon's Hezbollah, setting the stage for an end to nearly 14 months of fighting linked to the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip. Remember, this is only the Lebanon bit where fighting has now stopped because of ceasefire. The Israel-Hamas war continues. But importantly, as the ceasefire was being announced, Israeli warplanes kept up the most intense wave of strikes in Beirut and its southern suburbs since the war in fact began. Now, what are the details of this ceasefire? When is it likely to now come into force, and for how long will it go on? What is the impact of this on the other war front that Israel continues to fight on, which is with Hamas and several others? What happens to all of those questions? You find answers to in this report. Take a look.
An uneasy calm prevails over Lebanon after more than 2 months of intense bombings and killings. In a big relief to the Lebanese people, who have seen more than 3,500 of their relatives die since last year, Israel and Lebanon-based militant group Hezbollah reached a US-brokered ceasefire agreement to put an end to hostilities for 60 days. Displaced Lebanese families celebrated ahead of the possible announcement of a ceasefire, breathing a collective sigh of relief.
انبسطنا كثير وفرحنا والمدرسة احتفلت فينا. الله يحفظ مدرسة المرجان وطيار المستقبل اللي حضننا بأحسن استقبال وما قصر بواجباتنا أبدا أبدا. نشكرهم من كل قلبنا، مبسوطين لأن نحن راجعين على بلدنا على وطننا بالجنوب.
The sentiment did not echo on the Israeli side, as some displaced families said that they are disappointed with the ceasefire deal. While bombardment has driven 1.2 million Lebanese people from their homes, Israel says it has killed more than 2,000 Hezbollah members. On the other hand, Hezbollah's frequent rocket attacks forced some 50,000 Israelis to evacuate in the country's north. At least 75 people have been killed, more than half of them civilians. More than 50 Israeli soldiers have died in the ground offensive in Lebanon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel will respond strongly to any violation of the ceasefire with Hezbollah.
חיזבאללה יפר את הפסקת האש לא רק אם הוא יירה עלינו, הוא יפר את ההסכם גם כשהוא ינסה להתחמש כדי לירות עלינו בעתיד. על כל הפרה שלו נגיב בעוצמה.
As the sides came to terms to pause fighting, US President Joe Biden termed the ceasefire as good news and warned against violation of the truce deal.
Let me be clear. If Hezbollah or anyone else breaks the deal and poses a direct threat to Israel, then Israel retains the right to self-defense consistent with international law, just like any country when facing a terrorist group pledged to that country's destruction.
Israeli troops began a land invasion of Lebanon almost 2 months ago, after almost a year of rocket attacks from Hezbollah. While the ceasefire deal signals an end to a brutal conflict in West Asia, the region remains on edge as the Israel-Hamas war is far from over, and Tehran's tensions with Israel continue to boil from time to time. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, Melissa Weiss, Executive Editor of the Jewish Insider, joins me from Tel Aviv. Melissa, tell us, what is it that people in Israel are now making of this ceasefire? Are they happy?
Sure. I mean, happy is not really a term
Relieved.
that I think anyone would use here. I think Israel is ready. Israelis are ready to return home. Remember the 50-some-odd thousand Israelis who were displaced from their homes in the north on October 8th, 2023. They are ready to go home. But they don't feel confident just yet that this ceasefire will hold and that the different international parties will be able to keep Israel and Hezbollah to the terms of the agreement. So there's kind of a wait and see pattern that we're seeing right now with Israelis still not ready to go home. Home Front Command, which oversees security issues, not yet saying it is safe for Israelis to return to their homes in the north. And so Like I said, it's a wait and see pattern. We'll see what happens. We know already there was a violation of the ceasefire this morning when Hezbollah came into a village in southern Lebanon that they were not allowed to go into, and Israeli troops fired in response. So it doesn't seem so hopeful that the international peacekeeping forces are able to keep up their end of this. Hezbollah has not shown much of a willingness to keep up with an end to this, and so we'll see what happens.
All right, Melissa, we leave it there. Thanks much for giving us that update. Now, shifting focus, India has given the green light to Shukrayaan-1, part of India's Venus orbiter mission, and setting up India's own space station, Bharatiya Antariksha Station. Venus, often called Earth's twin, is the closest planet to Earth and is believed to have formed in conditions similar to Earth. The VOM probe will help scientists understand how planetary environments can evolve differently. It will also help search how Venus, believed to be once habitable and quite similar to Earth, transformed. India's very own space station will be ready by 2035, aligning with Prime Minister Modi's vision to call to land on the moon by 2040. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Global. Thanks so much for watching.